Hi, everybody, and welcome to our election night webcast here on WGRZ.com. We're going to be with you for the next few hours to go over everything with this election, from turnout to security and, of course, the actual results.
That's right. We're going to be here for a while. Now, the polls have already closed in a whole lot of states out there in this country, but will remain open for the next half hour, at least here in New York State. Now, we're once again joined by political analysts Bruce Fisher and Carl Calabrese. We're lucky to have both of them, so let's send it over to Two on Your Side, Steve Brown, for their conversation about this very important election tonight. And good evening to you, Steve. Nice to see you.
It's nice to be seen. Good evening, Scott. Good evening, Mary Alice. Yes, we have Bruce and Carl with us. They are not old friends, they are good friends. And better than that, they have some inside skinny on what's happening within their respective parties, not only just here, but also across the country. Gentlemen, let's start with this. We're 27 minutes away from the polls closing here locally. What is it? Is there an indication, first off, that you're looking for when the polls close? What is it that you're going to be looking for first? Bruce, let's start with you.
I'm very interested to know how many people are showing up, because what I was told earlier today from West Seneca and Orchard Park is that they're looking at, are you ready for this, almost a 90% cumulative turnout.
That's impossible.
It is. It's astounding that anybody would be talking anywhere above 40 or 50%. But if the numbers are trending in terms of volume that high, that's probably a pretty good sign for the state Senate candidate who's not expected to win, and that's Jackie Berger for the Mike Ranzenhofer seat, the open seat.
Carl, what are you looking for? What's the first thing you're going to be looking for once results start coming in here locally?
Well, if we're talking about the presidential race, obviously New York is a very deep, deep blue state, and that's not going to change. But, you know, the article in the paper the other day pointed out how those four towns in the center of Erie County, Cheektowaga, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Hamburg, are kind of typical of many parts of the country where you have the blue-collar Democrat, the former Reagan Democrat, and that the way those towns vote in the presidential election might be indicative of what might happen nationwide. We'll have to wait and see. That could be a very interesting barometer of Donald Trump's fate outside of the borders of New York State.
Gentlemen, what I love about Election Day versus the campaigns is that you hear from the voters. We hear from everybody else all year long, in presidential campaigns for 2 years, sometimes 2 years plus. But today is the day where the people who are really in charge you get to hear from, and those are the voters. And I think Election Day is far better than any day on a campaign. And this year we've seen a lot of early voting here in New York and in Western New York, more than we have ever had before, because of looser rules on absentee balloting, largely because of COVID, and because of a high interest in early voting. Is this the way you think that elections are going to go going forward? The absentee thing was a COVID executive order from the governor. But do you think this is the way that elections should go going forward, where there's a lot more access to vote before Election Day? Carl, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think once the genie is out of the bottle, it's going to be real tough to put her back in. When people get used to the convenience of early voting, mail-in voting, I don't think you're going to take it away from them. I think it's the way of the future, and we're just going to have to get used to it. You know, you talk about how Election Day, you hear from the voters. Our town chairman in Tonawanda used to say, what he loved about Election Night, it's certainty, it's finality. You knew at the end of the night who won and who lost. That may be a thing of the past with a lot of mail-in voting and the different rules with the states, especially as it pertains to a presidential race. We may just have to learn to live with multiple days before we know who the real winner is.
Bruce, are you satisfied with ballot access, being able to vote, or should there be more?
It's going to grow. Ballot access is going to grow. Look, there are a bunch of states that have been doing mail-in voting exclusively for years.
Right.
It's a very relatively confined thing, and we're sort of tiptoeing, creeping toward it, okay? But you're here in New York State. But guess what? There are other states where there's same-day registration. Holy cow. You know, that would, I think, encourage better quality of democracy, more interest, more people voting. I mean, I love it.
They've had that in Minnesota for a while.
The more the merrier, the more the better.
Yeah, and they've had that in Minnesota for a while, and they've had historically the highest turnouts for presidential races by a state ever, up in the 70% range, which is unheard of in states. The emerging issue, and Bruce, we talked with you earlier about this, but I want to talk about this. The thing that's in play here in the state, in my opinion, is whether or not the Democrats that hold sway in the state Senate end up with a veto-proof majority. I'd like to know whether or not you think that's possible, because it's exactly 2 seats they've got to flip, and I think that's easily within reach.
Everybody's focused on the relationship between the governor, very strong personality, very organized guy, and the legislative branch. Look, I think the governor communicates very capably with everybody. He doesn't have any problem, and I don't think he's ever going to have a desire to be vetoed. The issue for us in upstate New York is if we go from 2 Democratic senators, which is to say 2 members of the majority, to 5 members or 6 members of the majority. Holy cow, this body, which has been traditionally focused on Long Island and the Hudson Valley, is now going to have to pay attention to upstate New York. It's going to have to pay attention to us west of Albany. That, I think, is a very positive development.
Carl, it looks like the Republicans are going to be living on the margins in the legislature. Do you see an issue that the majority party is going to have if they have this veto-proof majority in the state Senate?
Oh, there could be a number of them with progressive left-type legislation that the governor may not want. But, you know, I disagree a little bit with Bruce. This governor does not take kindly to setbacks, especially from his own party. And if he starts getting into fights with Democrats in the Senate and the Assembly, and vetoes start getting overridden, I think it could get real hot real fast. As I said, you folks in the media are going to love it because you're going to have a lot of material to cover. But knowing this governor,
Pussycat, come on, Carl, you know him.
yeah, he's a pussycat, right?
It is without question that the governor has been. Believe me, it would be interesting. But I don't think there's any question that the governor has been the 800 or the 1,800-pound gorilla in state politics for a long time. It would be interesting if he had to truly negotiate with the legislature because they have a position of strength. That would be different. Gentlemen, we'll be back with you in a little bit. Scott and Mary Alice, we're going to toss it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Steve, Bruce, and Carl. Great stuff there. Great perspective on the state races. Now, we know it's a busy night, really, for everyone working on the election.
And we are very fortunate now to be joined by the Erie County GOP chairman. Joining us, Jeff Preval is live with that interview tonight. Good evening there, Jeff.
Yeah, we're live here at the Avant Hotel in downtown Buffalo, the site of GOP headquarters, and I am joined now by the chairman of the Erie County GOP Committee, Carl Simith. Mr. Simith, thank you very much for the time. Really do appreciate it.
You betcha.
Of course, with COVID, so many restrictions in place here. Normally, we would be seeing a lot of rah-rah press conferences and chanting and things like that.
Right.
Things are definitely toned down this year.
They sure are. This year, we're allowed only to have like 50 people, so we've got a room set upstairs. It's a war room, and that's where we're getting all the results. And we have another room set up for our candidates and some people that are really involved with Erie County GOP politics. But that's about it. I know just what you're saying. Last year at this time, this room was filled with people. So it's been an interesting campaign season, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. What is the plan for tonight in terms of watching all the results come in and then communicating to voters?
That's just about it. We're going to be watching the results just like you guys up in the war room. We'll be getting the early vote in from Board of Elections, and then we'll be getting today's vote in from the Board of Elections. And then we're just going to have to wait and see what the results are. And we've got all the mail-in voting and all the absentee voting to count.
Yeah, certainly we have the presidential race and the big race locally, Nate McMurray versus Chris Jacobs.
Correct.
The obvious question is, what are the races that you are specifically looking at in addition to those?
Well, we're really looking at New York 27 with the Chris Jacobs race, and we're watching very closely with State Supreme Court Justice Jerry Greenan. And I know the numbers, our numbers are showing that it's real close with our Assembly candidate Frank Schmierzak, and we're going to be watching that race real close.
Mm-hmm. There's been some talk about a possible supermajority after everything is all said and done, a supermajority in the state Senate. That would be bad news for you.
It sure would.
But do you have any concerns about that? And is there any message that you have to voters on that?
The only message I would have to the voters, there's only half hour, 50 minutes left in voting, but the voters got to understand that these Democrats in the Assembly and the Senate, they've turned their backs on law enforcement. And I think that our Republican candidates on row B, every candidate on row B backs law enforcement. So we've got high hopes for Ed Rath, and we're hoping Josh Mertzloff does a good job in his district.
Turning their backs on law enforcement, can you just be a little bit more specific? Are you referring to bail reform?
Exactly.
Those pieces of
Bail
legislation,
reform,
SAFE Act?
Discovery, bail reform. I mean, there's a lot going on. If they get the supermajority, the Assembly and the Senate, they're going to have full control of everything, and it's going to be one-party government, and that's not good for anybody.
On absentee ballots, we all know that it could be a while, days, right, before we get any real results out there. What are you telling your candidates? Well,
I'm telling them just to sit tight, and we're gonna look at the votes tonight, and we're gonna look at the results, and we'll see what happens. I'm not telling any of my candidates to declare victory or concede. We're just going to sit it out till all those votes are counted.
All right, Chairman, thank you very much. Appreciate the time. Back to you, Scott and Mary Alice.
Thanks very much, Jeff. The polls are still open for a few more minutes in Western New York, and we'll be waiting for results in our local congressional races.
To on your sides, Michael Wooten's been working all night tonight. He's in the newsroom with a look at those races for us there. And Michael, what are you finding out? What's the latest?
Yeah, Scott and Mary Alice, a couple of these congressional races that we're going to be following very closely. We'll talk about the southern tier in a moment, but first to the 27th district. We just heard the chairman talking about it there. It's Nate McMurray once again challenging the Republican incumbent Chris Jacobs. So what we're showing you on the screen right now, these are the results from back in June during that special election. Chris Jacobs won at 52 to 47. We can kind of go county by county here and show you it was very close in Erie County, 51-49. The only counties where Nate McMurray won were Monroe. There's just a sliver of this district that touches into Monroe, and then also Ontario County, where he won by a pretty good margin. But Chris Jacobs getting the job done. He now represents this district in Washington, D.C. But what you have to remember, this was a special election, and turnout was very, very low. I'm going to zoom back out here. If you look at the district-wide totals, you can see 81,000 votes for Jacobs, 73,000 votes for McMurray. Add those up, you're at what, 150,000 total votes? This race 4 years ago during the last presidential election had 328,000 votes. So we're going to have a lot more people participating in this election than we saw back during the special. So Nate McMurray hoping to maybe ride some of the coattails of Joe Biden here in New York State. One bit of tough news, though, for the Democrats. We looked, if you use the Target Smart early voting data, which is really insightful, they're saying only 40% of the early votes, so that's absentee and also people who went in person, only 40% of the votes were among Democrats, 49% of them among Republicans. And then you expect Republicans might do even better on the election day vote. And so, this is going to be an uphill battle. This is not a race that all of the handicappers across the country are considering to be super competitive, but we'll follow the numbers as we go. And then quickly, we'll tell you the other race that we're watching congressionally here in Western New York is down in the southern tier. This is Tom Reed, the longtime incumbent, facing Tracy Matrano. Obviously, no vote in yet. We'll be following these as well. We'll be able to take you kind of county by county across the southern tier once those votes start to come in. We expect, especially here in Chautauqua County, that we're going to get a lot of the vote results right at 9 o'clock. What it will not include will be all of those mail-in absentee ballots. Again, we don't count those for several days, more than a week. So everything here will be with kind of a grain of salt, but we'll at least be able to tell you how things are looking with the early vote and how things are looking for people who voted in person today. A lot to follow with these two races. And also, Steve, we should mention that once we hit the top of the hour, we hope to be able to go county by county and show you the presidential race as well.
Yeah, it's always great when we can actually get some numbers to report as opposed to what we think maybe the numbers might look like. Thank you, Michael. While we're talking about congressional races, especially the 27th race, which has been on our radar for a solid 2 years. Carl Calabrese and Bruce Fisher, we talked about this earlier off camera. I'm going to bring the conversation on camera. I think that this is an extraordinarily difficult race for Nate McMurray to win in either three versions of this, in the 18 race, in the special election earlier this year, and here. It is the reddest congressional district in New York State, and it's not even close. So the fact that he was in there and kept the race very respectable, darn near won the thing in 18, but it has still kept that race tight, and I think he's exceeded expectations. My thesis is, because he's done that well, and because he is very popular amongst the most progressive elements of the Democratic Party, I think Nate McMurray's name is going to be echoing around here in political circles for some time. Who wants to go first and knock me down?
Take it away, Charles.
I disagree. I believe, and from people I've spoken with at length in Grand Island, that if Nate McMurray had run for re-election as supervisor, he would have been defeated. He alienated a lot of people on Grand Island. I think, what's interesting about this congressional race, it's not really been looked at, but I don't believe the Democratic National Congressional Campaign Committee has put a dime into Nate McMurray's race. And that always tells you something. If they think a race is winnable, their internal polls show it, the money flows. And I've not seen one report of a single dollar coming in from the Congressional Campaign Committee. So I think that speaks volumes. But no, I think Nate McMurray is very far left. I think there's parts of his personality that I believe the more exposure he has to people, the less appealing he will be. I think he spoke volumes about his character when it was announced that Michael Caputo was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he put out an absolutely heartless, cold-blooded tweet that I think is going to stay with him for years in people's minds. And for all those reasons, I question his long-term ability here.
So, Bruce, do you concur with Carl?
I don't know Mr. McMurray at all, other than for his candidacy. He came within a point of beating the fellow who's now sitting in a prison cell someplace in Florida. Probably that was as close as Nate McMurray is going to get to being a member of Congress. But because it is, as you both pointed out, the reddest district in New York State. So the question is always, what do you do with all the name recognition that all of your hard campaigning has won for you? What do you run for? It's very difficult to see that Mark Poloncarz, as Erie County executive, is just going to move off to something. What would he move off to? There's only one other member of Congress in this media market, and that's Congressman Brian Higgins. The district that Higgins is occupied is, I think, going to be his for as long as he wants it to be there. And frankly, with reapportionment coming up, because this is a census year, I think there's going to be one fewer congressional districts in this part of the world. So
I think
good luck with McMurray, but I don't know where he goes from here.
Yeah, and Bruce, you segued right into what it was I'm going to talk about. When we get to reapportionment, which happens, census time, and then state legislatures take a look at congressional districts, I think it's a certainty we're going to lose one congressional seat statewide. I think it's still possible we'll lose two.
Could be two.
Who's walking the plank? Because if the Democrats are running the state legislature, the scenario that I see is that somehow they're going to shove, if Jacobs wins tonight, they're going to shove Jacobs and Tom Reed into a race and make them go at each other. Or find ways to marginalize them into districts where they can finally be defeated by Democrats. What do you think?
And that's easy. That's easy because Tom Reed wants to become Governor Tom Reed. I think when the earth crashes into the sun, that'll be a great day for Tom Reed, because that's about as soon as he'll become governor. The fact is that New York is a big state, almost 20 million people, but the rest of the country is growing in other places. So we will be seeing more congressional seats in the states of California, Texas, possibly Florida. It's going to come out of the Northeast and the Midwest. So yes, indeed. Strangely enough, the metro area of New York City is growing in population. So you're going to see more congressional seats in where the folks are. I mean, you got 67% of the people in New York State are in the 12 county area of New York City. You can't say no to proportional representation. It just doesn't work that way. So as our share of the state shrinks, and as the New York share of the national population shrinks, the number of congressional seats here will also shrink.
Carl, what do you think the upstate congressional representation picture is going to look like 2 years from now?
Well, we're certainly going to lose at least one seat. I think it's more likely we're going to lose two.
So
now, how do you configure those districts? I mean, I've heard some people, including some Democrats, say, well, they might carve out one, put all the Republicans in one district, okay? Give them one seat and divide up the Democrats with everybody else, so we have a super majority, more or less, in this congressional delegation. That could happen. Who knows the machinations that go on during reapportionment? I mean, you could write volumes about them. And the other thing about reapportionment is, remember, residency rules are out the window after reapportionment. So incumbent congressmen and women, if they are suddenly out in one district, can move to another one or campaign in another one. So there's lots of pieces on the chessboard that can get moved around very quickly. And it's one of the most fascinating times of the political calendar. It only comes once every 10 years, but it really is interesting. And the deals on top of deals that are made are just, it's unbelievable.
Don't watch sausage being made, and don't watch maps being made.
That's right. And we've lived through a reapportionment and a couple of them, and it's not pretty and it's not delicate. Let's put it that way. And there'll be lots of blood on the floor when it's over.
There's an interesting beast that comes out of the zoo every 10 years. It's called the gerrymander.
Yes, absolutely. But Carl, we're probably less than 40 seconds left. Where do you see the future opportunities for Republicans? I presume it's upstate. Is there a specific area, a specific venue, a specific chamber, a legislative chamber that you think there is opportunity for Republicans to replant the flag?
Well, I'll tell you, Steve, if the Democrats, the Democrats will control all three pens of the reapportionment drawing process: Senate, Assembly, Governor. They're going to reapportion the Senate majority in place for at least a decade, okay? If the Republican Party is going to rejuvenate itself, it's going to have to be at the grassroots level, at the village and town and county level, and create a farm system of elected officials that could run for Assembly seats and Senate seats if somebody gets in trouble or an incumbent retires. It's not going to be an overnight process. It's going to be a long process, because I believe the Democrats will lock in their majority in the Senate for the decade going forward, and that's the case in the Assembly.
Gentlemen, we got to run. Thank you very much. We'll be back with you. Back to you in the studio, Mary Alice.
All right. Great stuff as always. Thank you, guys. We are going to step aside for a moment, but we will rejoin you with our live stream at the top of the hour.
And we also hope to get a few election results as well from Western New York for you then. You can also tune in to Channel 2 in just a moment for another local update. We'll be right back with our Decision 2020 coverage.
Hey everybody, we are back here on 2 on Your Side with our Decision 2020 coverage in Western New York, with the polls closing just minutes from now all across the state.
And of course, Mary Alice, not long after, we should be getting some first results for some of the key races that we are watching for you here in Western New York. And that includes the 27th Congressional District, which Republican Chris Jacobs represents after beating Nate McMurray in a special election back in June. He's going to be trying to do that again for his first full term in Congress tonight. So while we don't have any numbers to show at this hour right now, we do have a look back at the last time that these two faced off. Michael Wooten's here now with a look at that. Hello, Michael.
Yeah, hey, Scott and Mary Alice. This is going to change here shortly because at the top of the hour, we'll get actual vote in and we'll be able to start from scratch. But what you're seeing on your screen right now is from back in June and the special election. Turnout was very low back then, so today is a completely different race. But Chris Jacobs ended up pulling that off 52-47, winning the seat in Congress. As you mentioned, now running for a full term. What we can tell you here, you can see the two counties shaded in blue, Monroe and Ontario. Those are the ones that Nate McMurray won. Chris Jacobs won all of the others. We'll zoom in here to Erie County where it was very close, 51-49. If Nate McMurray wants any chance of pulling an upset today, he will need to switch that around and win Erie County by a pretty good margin. But as we come back out, I want you to look at one number. When you add up Jacobs and McMurray, you get to about 150,000 votes. We expect we're going to be over 300,000 votes for the race this time around. So it's very different from before. This is a starting point, but at the top of the hour, we'll start to get some actual vote in. You'll want to join us on our webcast. We'll be able to go county by county and show you how this race is playing out, along with the presidential race and also the congressional race down in the southern tier.
We are anxious to see some real numbers. Thank you, Michael.
Any minute.
Yeah, we know that Buffalo is one of many cities also getting ready for any potential unrest tonight and beyond. Buffalo police say that they've coordinated with county, state, and federal partners to prepare for anything that may happen. And the FBI is also working with cities, including here, to keep people and businesses protected. And we are also looking to get verified answers to your questions throughout the night. Text them to our Text 2 line at 849-2200, or you can get in touch with us on social media.
That is all for right now at this hour. We're going to send you back to NBC's election night coverage.
And the webcast continues in just 1 minute on WGRZ.com. You can also watch it on our 2 on Your Side app. So join us and stick around for the first real results from Western New York. They're coming up.
And we want to welcome you back to our Decision 2020 webcast here on WGRZ.com and our free mobile app. The polls just closed in New York State, basically just about 19 seconds ago. But before we get to a few of the results for you tonight, we know that it has been a rather unusual election year because of the pandemic. That has led to more absentee ballots than a typical year. So let's head out live now to 2 on Your Sides, Dave McKinley, for some information on that. Hey there, Dave.
Hi there, Scott. As we've been reported throughout the evening, in fact, in our early evening newscast, just in Erie County alone, they have already received nearly 81,000 absentee ballots. And, of course, these ballots won't be counted until 2 weeks from tonight. That's when they'll start counting them. And, of course, because all they have to be is postmarked by today in order to count, we would expect even more to come trickling in here over the next several days. Now, the thought had always been, and theorized by the pundits, that more Democrats would vote by absentee than Republican. And based on some numbers that we've obtained tonight in some key races locally, that seems to be bearing out. In fact, in almost all of them. But one in particular we'll call your attention to is the 27th Congressional District race. That is the one between Chris Jacobs, who won the special election in June over his Democratic challenger, Nate McMurray. Now, there's a district that is overwhelmingly Republican, but there are 26,840 442 absentee or mail-in ballots that have already been received just in Erie County. Remember, that's a district that encompasses all or parts of 8 counties. And there, even in that overwhelmingly Republican district, we do see that 12,000 of those 26,000 ballots that have come in through the mail came from registered Democrats, about 7,000 of them from registered Republicans, and another 7,000 from others. How do they know this? Well, on the ballot envelopes they received back, there is an R or D indicating if someone is registered to a particular party. That's how they know if they're coming from Democrats or Republicans. But important to remember as well, that doesn't necessarily mean that 12,442 Democrats voted by absentee ballot for Nate McMurray, because they obviously haven't opened them, so they don't know. They know where they came from. They know that that was a registered Democrat, for example, but they don't know if they voted for the Democrat. So, but that just gives you some context on how many of these absentee ballots did come in today. And it's important to note that in a race, a particularly close one, this could spell the difference between victory and defeat for a particular candidate. Again, going back to that race again, that June special election, you'll remember that when election night was over on that special election in June, McMurray trailed Chris Jacobs by about 28,000 votes. But when all the absentees were counted, McMurray ended up losing by less than 10,000. Still a significant margin, but it does give you an idea, even though the old adage is that absentee ballots tend to follow the vote that's cast at machine ballots. In that case, there was an exception. He made up a lot of ground. And now we have numbers here, and we're putting them on for our website for you in various races of interest, the breakdown between Democrats and Republicans.
All righty, Dave, thanks very much. And as you know, the polls are now closed here in New York State. And that means we've already got some projections in.
And to your sides, Michael Wooten is in our newsroom right now with a look at some of the early results out there. Hello there once again, Michael.
Hey, Scott and Mariella. So I thought we were going to have Chautauqua County results to show you. They literally just posted them, so it's taking a second for the system to update. But NBC News has already projected that Joe Biden wins the state of New York. This based entirely on the exit polls. Of course, they do a lot of analysis looking at the early vote, what they know about who actually went out and did early voting. The exit polls across the country include some 100,000 people surveyed. That's people who mailed in their votes, went early, or voted today. So it's a pretty elaborate system based entirely on those exit polls. NBC is projecting that Joe Biden wins the state of New York. Not a surprise, right? So at the moment, we don't have any of the election results in. We believe Chautauqua County will update in just a second. Chautauqua County, to their credit, always very fast at getting this stuff done. Kudos to them. So we'll be able to go county by county and show you how this is looking. If we go out to the rest of the country, we'll pull this up right now. You can see how things are starting to shade in. The state of New York, still no results in yet. That's why it's not colored in. This just tells you which candidate is winning in these states right now. And you'll notice Texas is purple. That's because it's within, I'll zoom in there. You can see it's 50-49. So whenever it's this close, it's colored in purple. And then if it's a dark shade of blue, that means Joe Biden's winning there by more than 5 points. If it's a light shade of blue, it's closer than that. And then same with red. If it's dark red, that means Donald Trump is winning by 5 points or more. And then the light red or the pink is where it's a little bit close, but Trump has the edge. So as we're zoomed out right now, you can see nationally, the president, 51% of the vote, Joe Biden, 48%. We are now over 40 million votes counted, but that's, that leaves us a long way to go, obviously, before we're done tonight. So this is how things are looking now. And again, as we'll zoom into New York, none of the vote tallied up yet, but we believe we'll start to get some results pretty soon, especially in Chautauqua County. And then remember, Erie County plans to put out its early vote pretty quickly. So we'll know that. And then, of course, as we go throughout the night, we'll get more and more of the numbers in. But NBC News already calling the state of New York and its 29 electoral votes for Joe Biden based on those exit polls. And Scott and Mary Alice, when we see you next time, we'll try to go through some of those exit polls. They just released them because our polls just closed. They don't want to put that stuff out until polls are closed. So we'll look through and see what tidbits of information are in those exit polls.
Should be very interesting. Thank you, Michael.
Appreciate it, Michael. Right now, we are fortunate once again to be joined by political analysts Carl Calabrese and Bruce Fisher tonight.
They are continuing their socially distanced conversation with Channel 2's Steve Brown. Hi there, Steve.
Hi there, Scott. Hi there, Mary Alice. Yes. Gentlemen, we've heard some data via Dave McKinley that absentee ballots in Erie County regarding the 27th congressional district race seem to favor Democrats by 12-7, roughly about a 5,000 vote margin. Do we dare presume that the early vote matches similarly, that there were more Democrats participating in that?
That there's no way of knowing, because the district it looks very differently from the perspective of Erie County. Look, this is a district that stretches all the way to the Finger Lakes. I mean, you're going to have a district office there in Canandaigua, right? Most people
Be
here don't
nice.
even
I grew up in the Finger Lakes. Be nice.
Okay. So you got to cross Mount Morris and faraway Geneseo and many heads of dairy cattle between here and there. So yes, Amherst will be able to count. The other places in Erie County, Hamburg and Orchard Park, but I have no idea, and I dare say we probably don't have any idea of what the rest of the district looks like.
And Carl's shaking his head, so I'm guessing
No, I
you have
agree.
some
I
intel.
agree. Keep our powder dry on this. I'd be very hesitant to make too many assumptions about the race based on those numbers. Let's keep our powder dry on that one.
Okay. Some of the national results have come in, a lot of the, quite frankly, more non-contested states, if you will, and everything is holding to form, according to 2016. Every state that's been called that was for Hillary Clinton has gone for Biden, and every state that's been called that President Trump won 4 years ago, he won again. Okay. To each of you, what is a state that you think can be flipped in the favor of your party? And whoever wants to start, jump in.
Ohio, very possibly, because the suburbs in Ohio have gone very blue. There's a very big disenchantment with Donald Trump in Youngstown and in the Cleveland and eastern areas of the state because there were big promises about reindustrialization and they have not materialized. Specifically, there's 100,000 jobs in the steel industry that have gone away, many of those in the state of Ohio. I doubt that Donald Trump is going to put up the numbers that he did last time. Will the rural parts of Ohio save him? Possibly. I don't know. But the rest of the state of Ohio is looking a lot like Texas. And Texas is another state that might surprise us tonight. This might be the year that Texas goes blue.
Carl, is there a state that you think the president can flip from 2016?
If probably out the southwest part of the country, Arizona, you might have a shot at flipping Arizona, and that could change his map and change his calculations in terms of the Electoral College. But that would be the one. In Michigan, he barely squeaked out a victory 4 years ago. Even though that's not a flip, it'd be very impressive if he won it again, even though it wouldn't be a flip.
He won Arizona last time, Carl.
Did he win Arizona?
Yeah, he did. And the Senate candidate there.
Was it Nevada that he lost?
Was going to beat McSally. So
did Hillary win?
No, she did not win Arizona.
I'm mistaken. Sorry.
Let's move on to the Keystone State, which might be the keystone to this election. We're starting to see some vote totals come in. It has been a highly contested race. Previous conversation I had with Carl, when I was covering presidential campaigns, this was a Democratic state. They had a huge registration advantage. It was very difficult for a Republican to win in that state. You think the landscape has changed and changed dramatically there?
Oh, it has. It has. 8 years ago, Democrats had an 830,000 vote majority in Pennsylvania. That's now down to 130,000. I was saying off camera to Bruce, Republicans have added 215,000 new Republican registrants in the last year. He won the state by what, 45,000 4 years ago? So that's a huge change in the political picture and the political landscape of Pennsylvania. There really has been a seismic change in the political registration landscape in Pennsylvania, and that should help Republicans.
Bruce, what is it that has changed the landscape from a state that was considered pretty solid blue to purple over the course of 8 years? Is there something politically going on there that we're just not paying attention to?
It was a big state for Obama and two successful elections. Absolutely, right? And they just did not like Hillary Clinton enough in the two bookends of the state. James Carville very famously said, and I attribute this to James Carville, he said that there's Pittsburgh in the west, Philadelphia in the east, and Alabama in the middle. And that has become more true in the Trump era. Look, at the moment, we are looking at the question of whether what Vice President Biden said about fracking and about what he said about fracking versus what Trump said about fracking.
Which time, Bruce?
So the question is that going to change things? Carl and I have a different analysis of this. My look at it is that if you're involved in the fracking industry, you hate Biden. If you are not involved in the fracking industry, something else is going to motivate you. And I think what's motivating a lot of folks in the Philadelphia suburbs and in the Pittsburgh suburbs and even in Erie, Pennsylvania, which is a very distressed area these days since General Electric shut down its locomotive plant that it had had there for 120 years. I think what's motivating folks there is the other issues. COVID-19, the management of the coronavirus, the perception that Biden is a unifier versus Trump as a perceived divider. So that's the politics that I think is going to decide Pennsylvania, not politics.
There's 600,000 jobs in Pennsylvania that are either directly or indirectly tied to the energy business. And these are blue collar workers who make six-figure incomes. If you watched the town hall that George Stephanopoulos did, he read a letter from a Boilermaker, a Democrat who said, "I don't trust you, Joe Biden, on fracking and energy, flip-flops, so on and so forth." Well, there was an author or a writer named Selena Zito who went out and interviewed him and wrote an article about it. And he said, "I'm an old-line Democrat. I'm still a Democrat, even though all my friends in the union have become Republicans. I'm holding on. The party has moved so far left. If I don't see some movement back to the center, I'm leaving in the next 2 years." But I mean, he laid out very clearly what's going on in the minds of blue-collar former Democrats or Democrats in on a short time frame here. And it was a very interesting article because he laid out about the energy business, about law and order, about defense.
But we've seen this going on since the mid 1970s, Carl. This is nothing new. Okay,
that's correct.
And the economic geography. I keep talking. I mean, I teach economics at Buffalo State College. Shout out to Buffalo State College here. I'll tell you what drives political behavior more often than not is economic anxiety, and we have a lot of it in the Great Lakes region. And the question is, who is going to be perceived to be more reliable as a delivery frankly, as the deliverer? The question is maybe going to be answered in this election. In Ohio, where Trump made very specific promises and those promises didn't work, he's down in the areas that had raised expectations. I don't expect a lot from central Pennsylvania for Joe Biden. I don't expect a lot from northeastern Pennsylvania for Joe Biden. I do expect a lot from the rest of the state. This is going to be a nail biter in Pennsylvania, and we're going to have to bite our nails for 5 or 6 days.
But Bruce, you're right. This dynamic's been going on since the 70s, but the speed and the scope of it in Pennsylvania over the last 8 years has really been impressive.
They were for Obama, they were for Obama again, and then they were for Trump.
That's the president. And one candidate who's not, and that's Joe Biden. Isn't that an invitation for all of those formerly disaffected Democrats in places like Johnston and Harrisburg and Altoona and others to say, okay, I'm going to vote with my wallet. I'm going to go back with the president. Isn't that an invitation?
Steve, you're amplifying Carl's point. The question is, what about the rest of the 10 million people in the state of Pennsylvania? How are How are they going to participate? Look, there's going to be something around 4.5 to 5 million votes cast in Pennsylvania. So far, there's been 1.8 million votes cast. That's in the early voting. Okay, so that leaves maybe 3.5 to 4 million votes. If we look at those numbers right now, as far as I can tell, based on the patterns have been happening elsewhere, the day of voting favors Republicans. The previous voting heavily favors Democrats. Are we going to see another nail biter in the state of Pennsylvania? Yes, we are. Meanwhile, right next door in Ohio, there's something that nobody anticipated, which is that it is now competitive. In Michigan, Donald Trump, I think, is not going to win again. Wisconsin, I think he's not going to win again. So add up the electoral votes. Add them up. If Trump wins in Pennsylvania, he's closer to getting there. But if Biden wins in Pennsylvania, as I still think he will, and in Michigan, and in Wisconsin, and adds Ohio to it, I think that this is over.
It's over. I agree with you. It's over. If Biden takes Pennsylvania, Ohio, and those other Midwestern states, Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, it's over.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to jump in because we've got some other news we got to get to tonight. We'll be back with you in just a little bit. Let's go now to Claudine Ewing, who has Congressman Brian Higgins for a live conversation. Claudine?
Hey there, Steve. Yes, we are at the Democratic Party headquarters, and joining me live right now is Congressman Brian Higgins. And Congressman, you have a race yourself.
I do. And there's no results at this point as the polls close at 9 o'clock. But here's what we know. Over 200,000 people voted early in Erie County, over 100 million people throughout the nation. A great demonstration of the great institution of Election Day and the electoral process in our democratic process. So, the results, each state has a different set of rules as it relates to voting. So, we may not know any results in terms of the national politics, the presidential election, for several days.
Yeah, that's what I've heard Bruce Fisher and Carl Calabrese actually saying. You have a different perspective because you are in Washington. You work closely with the president. You're there. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
No, I think, the good thing is people are engaged. When you have 100 million people voting early, whether it's through the polls or through the mail because of the pandemic, but the numbers, it's the highest voter turnout in 100 years, which tells you something. The nation is clearly engaged in this election. The problem is you don't have one standard nationally as it relates to when the votes are counted and when they're reported. So you have 50 different states and you have 50 different laws as it relates to all that stuff. So this could be a long night, it could be a long week, it could be a long month.
Does this also point to the passion of the people of America? They're passionate about this. They have something to say and they want their voices heard, no matter which way it goes.
Well, that's what American democracy is all about. And that's the institution of voting, which is, the tradition of American democracy. I was at a polling place in Cheektowaga at 7:30 this morning. A lot of people out, a lot of people engaged. People are very passionate, regardless of where they may stand as it relates to the candidates that they support. But the good thing is that's American democracy. And whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, or an independent, people are demonstrating their constitutional right to vote. And we are so unique as it relates to the rest of the world. So the reality is that, because of that, you have a situation where the counting of votes is going to take a long time. So we all want immediate gratification. We want immediate results. But the reality is, given the circumstances with so many people engaged, which is a good thing, the consequence of that is that we have to be patient about the result.
What can you learn from this as a Democrat who's been in office for so many years? What can you learn from this? Because there are many people who are Republicans who want things to be status quo in Washington when it comes to the president, that is. So what do you do so that you can bridge the gap with them?
Nobody should have to wait 3 hours in line to vote. That is unacceptable. You have, technology. You have the United States Postal Service, which should not have been sabotaged as it was by this administration. That people have to wait in line 3-4 hours to vote is unacceptable in American democracy. That they are is a testament to their desire to participate in the democratic process. So we need to learn to make it more accessible, more convenient, more efficient for people to demonstrate their constitutional right to vote. This is, when you see people waiting 4 or 5 hours in line, that's a manifestation of voter suppression. And that is some states who have taken the initiative to keep people from being able to vote in an efficient, effective, and a timely way. And that is not only unfair, it is un-American, and we need to do something about that.
Brian, thank you for your time. We hope to hear from you a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's Congressman Brian Higgins, also in a race of his own. We'll hear more from him later on. We'll send it back to you.
All right, thank you, Claudine Ewing. Well, we are going to step aside for a moment, but we will rejoin you for our continuing webcast at 9:30.
And you can also join us for a quick update. We'll be on Channel 2 in just a moment from right now. So keep it here on WGRZ.com and our mobile app. Mobile app. That
Easy
would
for
be.
you to say.
Yeah, all night. We'll see you in a bit. Well, the polls have been closed for about half an hour right now, and the results are coming in to 2 on your side. No surprise here. NBC News projects New York State's electoral votes are going to former Vice President Joe Biden.
And we're getting some results now, as well as the races that we've been following here. We wanted to check in on the 27th Congressional District with Republican Chris Jacobs, trying to win his first full term after beating Nate McMurray in a special election back in June. So far, the results are not coming in just yet, but we'll be coming back to that one as soon as we get some vote tallies.
And then there is, of course, the 23rd Congressional District. That's down in the southern tier, a rematch of 2 years ago when Republican Tom Reed held his seat in Congress by beating Democrat Tracy Matrano. This time around, it is a very, very close race here, folks. 51% for Tom Reed to 48% for Matrano. So it's still a very, very close race.
And as the results come in, it's a busy night at the Erie County Board of Elections.
Of course, they have been counting early votes along with everyone who cast their ballots today. And 2 on your side's Dave McKinley has been live there as they do it tonight. Hello there, Dave.
Hiya, Scott and Mary Alice. Yeah, they're tabulating those votes cast today. Of course, they promised they would have, almost right after the polls closed, the results of the early votes. Some 168,000 Erie County's registered voters voted early, and they have released the results of those. We can tell you that Erie County, at least from the early votes counted, all right, Joe Biden took Erie County 63% to 35% for incumbent President Donald Trump. Again, early votes just in Erie County. You mentioned the New York 27 district, and in the Erie County votes, now remember, that's a district that encompasses all or parts of 8 counties, but through the early voting, Chris Jacobs with a 52 to 46% margin over Nate McMurray. That's a 3,500 vote difference. Again, that's just for the early votes. Now remember, this is something we've been telling you about all night. The number of absentee ballots that have come in Erie County, they won't be counted for 2 weeks. 81,000 of them. And in that New York 27, we got about 26,000 of those. Just about half of them are Democrats. Republicans and others compose the others. So the theory that Democrats would vote largely by mail-in ballot seems to be holding true in that, in a lot of key races, and that could change the outcome. And of course, that could make for a very long night, and indeed, in some races, a long couple of weeks. Guys?
We have been preparing for that possibility. Thank you, Dave. Well, that is all for now, everybody. We're going to send you back to NBC's election night coverage.
And the webcast, of course, that will continue in just 1 minute from now. That's on WGRZ.com and the 2 on your side app. So join us and stick around for the first results.
Welcome back, everybody, to our Decision 2020 webcast here on WGRZ.com and our 2 on your side mobile app.
And we are getting some more results in, so let's get right to 2 on your sides. Michael Wooten is in the newsroom. And Michael, what is coming in right now?
Hey, Scott and Mary Alice, 30 minutes after polls have closed, all of the numbers that we have right now are from the early vote. And that's why if you look in the upper left part of your screen, it does now say 1%. So there is 1% of the day of vote today. But for the most part, what we're about to show you is the early vote. We'll zoom in here. Erie County, 63% for Joe Biden, 36% for Donald Trump. This is showing 2% of Erie County's vote in. So this is a lot of early vote and then a little bit of the day of vote. And then Joe Biden there doing pretty well. Up in Niagara County, 59-40. Again, we want to give this caveat that this is mostly early vote, which we expected would favor Joe Biden over Donald Trump. As we get more of the day of vote, this could tighten a little bit. And then finally, we'll go down to Chautauqua County. Look on the upper left, it says 0% in. That means this is entirely the early vote. About 7,400 votes for Biden, 6,500 votes for Donald Trump. If we look back 4 years ago, Donald Trump only lost Erie County. Right now, Joe Biden winning all the counties for which we have votes right now. I want to zoom out a little bit and show you the rest of New York State. And if you look downstate, a lot of the early vote is in there as well. This is Manhattan, New York County. Look at that, 89% for Joe Biden, 10% for Donald Trump. Big margins as well. This is Queens. We'll go down here. This is Kings County up in the Bronx. You're just looking at massive margins down there. Again, all the early vote, but a lot of vote coming in there. And I'm going to switch over right now and show you the exit polls. And this is how NBC News was able to call Joe Biden the winner as soon as polls closed right at 9 o'clock. I know it's small, but if you look right there, again, this is the exit polling in New York State. It's showing Joe Biden winning 62% of the male vote, 62% of the female vote. So you can see this race not going to be close here in New York State. Not a surprise to anybody, but that's how this has already been a called race. Want to go back really quickly to our maps here. We'll zoom out again, show you New York State as a whole, 1% of the vote in. Joe Biden closing in on 1 million votes. Donald Trump with about 300,000. I want to switch over and see if we have any vote coming in right now in our congressional races. So we'll start here with the 23rd district down in the southern tier. Nothing yet. We believe that'll be coming in soon. And then you have the 27th congressional district race. Same thing. So these will start to fill in just a moment. We'll be able to take you county by county and see how these races are shaking out. I know the 23rd, with the limited amount of vote we have in so far, was very close, 51-49, something like that. So we'll be able to go through those. Both of these congressional races favoring the Republican going into today. So we'll see how those all play out. We'll also, again, continue to look as more and more of the vote comes in the all-important presidential race. Right now, statewide, with 1% of the vote in, 76% for Joe Biden, 24% for Donald Trump. Steve, we'll keep watching the numbers and relay it to you as we get more results.
All right. Thank you, Michael. Bruce and Carl, we're going to bring Bruce and Carl back into the conversation. I would like to know from you, baseball scores a bunch of different things during the course of a baseball game, and one of them is errors. If there was an error you were going to award to your standard bearer for your party, what would that error be? Did they do something they shouldn't have? Did they not do something that they should have done? Bruce, let's start with you.
I think that spending more time in Florida might have helped them get better results for the Biden candidacy. There's apparently in Broward County, the turnout among African Americans is not very high, not as high as they needed to be. And they had a problem that they apparently weren't addressing soon enough with the Hispanic vote in Florida, because there was the assumption that 1 million displaced people from Puerto Rico would come over seething with rage at Donald Trump, who threw paper towels at them, and folks didn't get them registered. Likewise, they didn't adequately rebut this foolish accusation that somehow Joe Biden, middle of the road, Joe Biden is channeling Castro. So there was a big turnout of Hispanic voters, very conservative Hispanic voters in Miami-Dade. Not enough turnout of African American and Caribbean voters in the county just north of there, and frankly, that's a lost opportunity.
There was some discussion on NBC this evening. I think it was Andrea Mitchell who pointed out, I believe, that the Trump campaign had been canvassing Hispanic voters in South Florida for 2 years in advance of the election. if that's in fact the case, then they really understood the strategy to win that state. And it appears, and it's a thin margin, as I take a look at it, it's 300,000 out of almost 10.5 million votes cast. So it's not a really huge margin, but
it's not a big margin. It's Florida. Florida's a 1.5% state, but a little more effort. Frankly, that's the only error that I can see. Everything else, in terms of turnout, voter registration, motivation, there's a gender gap that the Biden campaign is experiencing and riding. That's why Ohio is in play. That's why Arizona is in play. That's why we think that the 3 states that Donald Trump won on the margin, namely Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, are solidly in the Biden camp. But that victory could have been sealed early this evening had Florida flipped blue. It didn't.
Carl, if you're going to award an error to the Trump campaign, what error would you bestow upon them?
It's an error that was 4 years in the making, and that Donald Trump has never been very focused. And, he had this incredible spurt of activity the last week and a half, 2 weeks of these rally after rally after rally. But he never really stayed focused on his number one issue, his strongest issue, which is the economy. And, he said things in those rallies that made the race more about him. And that's exactly what the Democrats wanted, was a referendum on Trump. For example, he said the other day that doctors are lining their pockets with the COVID deaths. That was, that gets everything off track. That allows the media to bring in another issue. He should have been talking about the economy, and he should have been making it an election about the choice between agendas, the leftist movement of the Democrats and Biden, and his agenda and his economy. And he just wasn't focused in that incredible burst of activity the last 10 days.
The message discipline. That's something that campaigns talk about all the time. We're going to talk about what we want to talk about and deflect all other things towards the things that we want to talk about. Carl, Bruce, thank you very much. We gotta jump because Claudine Ewing has the lieutenant governor standing by. Claudine?
Okay. Hey there, Scott. Or Steve, yes, we are here with the Lieutenant Governor right now, Kathy Hochul. Kathy, we heard you just talk about the race. The presidential race is what everybody is talking about, but talk about this year.
This year has been extraordinary, and we need Joe Biden now more than ever before. When you think about what we had overcome, dealing with the pandemic, New York State was the epicenter. We're nowhere out of the woods with respect to the number of cases and hospitalizations. We need someone who's going to take this seriously. The COVID virus is still very much among us. Joe Biden understands that. He'll follow what we did here in the state of New York, leading by following the experts, making sure we have enough testing and contact tracing and a plan for vaccination. Donald Trump has failed with respect to saving lives during a pandemic. That's one reason why we need to have Joe Biden elected this year. It's really important for New Yorkers.
We've heard a lot of talk about a supermajority. Explain that and why that's important.
A supermajority in the New York State Senate, that's a very likely scenario when we have a number of pickups. Sean Ryan from Buffalo will replace a Republican. That's another Democrat. We expect to have some wins in the Rochester area as well as some in the Hudson Valley. So there'll be a significant majority for the Andrea Stewart-Cousins to preside and to lead over the Democrats. That's important. It's important for us to have a wider margin because there could be another swing year. Something that we all enjoyed this year, the early voting. That's a reform that came about when Democrats took control of the Senate. Republicans didn't want that for years. They could have done that earlier like many other states. That's just one example of what Democrats have done with their leadership.
Some have said the numbers have been astounding. We were at a polling place in the Elmwood Village earlier today. They had over 1,100. We saw at least 100 people come in while we were there just for like an hour and a half. Over 1,100 people, that's a lot. Something they normally have not seen.
I find that really, really encouraging, and I hope this is a continuation of a new trend, that this is not just a one-off this year, that everybody will realize how important it is that they participate. Our democracy is founded on the premise that the citizens will use their right to elect their leaders. It's very simple, but it's powerful. It's what sets us apart from countless other nations around the world where people don't have that privilege. So I'm really encouraged and energized by seeing the number of people participating. on Election Day as well as the early voting.
Lieutenant Governor, no surprise to you the AP was able to call New York as soon as the polls closed for Joe Biden?
We knew this was Biden country because he understands New Yorkers. He understands people from upstate New York. He understands New York City. He understands the needs of everyday families, people who've suffered like he has, people who've had to sacrifice. So he's our kind of guy. He reflects our New York State values, and I'm so excited to welcome him to the White House. I don't want to be premature in my predictions here, but New York is an important state, and I believe he's going to do well with another number of battleground states that'll be called hopefully in the next few hours.
One thing that might get lost in the narrative a little bit this year, but potentially Kamala Harris could make history as the first female vice president. Your thoughts on that?
And I'm wearing white because that's the color of suffragettes, and we cannot forget the fact, as you remind us, that this is the 100th anniversary of women winning the right to vote in this country. What a year to have history making right before our eyes. The first woman elected vice president and a woman of color to boot. I think this is so exciting for me as a woman who's waited a long time, who remembers when Geraldine Ferraro, a congresswoman from Queens, was on the ballot in 1984. We were so excited then. I was a young staffer on Capitol Hill. She didn't make it with Walter Mondale. A generation later, now I feel very good about the chances that we'll be able to call her a vice president. So yes, as the birthplace of women's rights overall, but the women's right to vote movement in New York State, it's a particular point of pride for all of us.
Is there, though, that concern about that silent majority? I mean, we saw what happened 4 years ago, and we don't want to be overexcited, at least from your perspective, saying that it's a Biden-Harris White House. So that concern about those who just kind of remain silent and then they come out on Election Day and they go to work. It happened 4 years ago. What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Do you see that happening?
Well, right. It is too early to call the election, no doubt about it. I have been a strong supporter of Biden-Harris from the very beginning, as has Governor Cuomo. So we're excited about their prospects. I think they're making a lot of headway in some key battleground states. But you're right, the numbers are not complete. And if it goes to voting and counting for all the absentee ballots, it could take much longer time, no doubt about that. And so we'll wait and see. I'm not going to predict either way, but I feel very good that all I know is that if there is a Biden-Harris administration, that New York State will be far better off when it comes to getting the resources we need to help with our budget to be able to fund first responders and teachers and healthcare workers and childcare workers and everybody who's been so affected by this pandemic. That's what we are laser focused on. Whoever will do the most good for New York as we deal with this pandemic. We've seen that Donald Trump has failed that test, and we're very, very, very hopeful that it becomes President Joe Biden who will understand what needs to be done.
We have seen a nation divided. If the White House changes, does that division continue or not?
I think what we saw over the last 4 years was a cult of personality surrounding one individual. We have had divided government before. We have had Republican presidents and a Democratic House. There was never that animosity, that almost visceral hatred of the other side. That's a result of how one person divided this country. It does not have to be that way. I worked for Senator Moynihan back when Ronald Reagan was president. There was collaboration. There was respect for the institutions. We can get back to that. I really do believe we can.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul with us. We'll send it back inside to you.
Alrighty, some insightful words there from Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, and interesting to hear her perspective too as a woman who's been actively involved in politics since the 80s.
Yep, she certainly has. And we also heard from Congressman Brian Higgins just a few moments ago. That was at about 9:20. And now we are getting to hear from Congressman Chris Jacobs.
Two on your sides. Jeff Preval had a conversation with him just moments ago.
We are joined now by Congressman Chris Jacobs. How you doing,
Good.
Congressman? Good to see you tonight. Of course, a lot going on. Certainly a different setup because of the COVID restrictions this election year, election cycle. What is the plan for you specifically tonight? Do you plan on declaring victory or defeat?
Well, I'm just going to wait like everybody else on the results. Polls just closed at 9, so eagerly going to watch it. I feel very, very good. The turnout was very, very high today, which is good for us, and we're excited how engaged the populace is, and I feel very good about today. And I've been in office now about 4 months, and hopefully the voters have seen the way I've conducted myself and how I've aggressively jumped into representing this district and getting true representation back to this district. So I hope that that gives them the confidence that I deserve a full term.
Let me ask you, in the last few months, what have you learned about Washington, Congress, the way things are done? What have you learned over the last few months?
Well, I think that I've had a good relationship with people on both sides of the aisle when I was in the Senate in Albany, taking that same approach down in Washington, that you get things done by working and finding commonalities. So, like, I've worked with Brian Higgins on a lot of things thus far. I'm also very excited that I really advocated hard to be put on the Agriculture Committee, and I've been put on that committee because New York 27th is a huge ag district that's a bigger farm, so farm is the biggest employer. So I'm in a position now where I think I can really make a difference in helping farmers in our community. So I think I've positioned myself to be the most effective representative I can and getting as much done down there and here on the ground.
When people think about NY27, they may still think about Chris Collins. Do you feel that there is still a lingering stain on the seat because of Chris Collins?
I don't. I think people have moved on. He's paying his debt to society, and but I think the district is moving on. We're dealing with COVID, coming out of COVID. So those are the focus, areas, that people getting their lives back, getting their jobs back, getting their way of life back.
Yeah. And knowing that there are so many absentee ballots that are out there, we're likely not going to get any real result tonight, tomorrow morning, tomorrow during the daytime. What can we expect from you in the days ahead?
We just report as it comes in. I mean, this is not dissimilar from what we had to deal with the special election. It took 3 weeks for us to get the final result. So, we have trust in the system and the integrity of the New York State system in doing it. And if that's the case, we'll just wait to make sure that it's done right and that people have assurances that there's integrity in the way it's done.
All right, Congressman Chris Jacobs, thank you so much. Appreciate the time. Back to you.
All right, Jeff, thank you very much for that. Also, right now, of course, we all know it is shaping up to be an extremely close presidential election tonight.
Well, 2 on Your Side's Michael Wooten is over in our newsroom with an update on how Western New Yorkers are voting in that race. Michael?
Yeah, when we saw you last, guys, I'll zoom this out. It looked like Niagara, Erie, and Chautauqua County were all 3 blue. You'll notice now Niagara and Chautauqua counties have switched to the light red. Very close still in them. We'll start in the north. Niagara County right now doing pretty well, reporting the totals. 27% is in. Now that includes what we believe is a huge chunk of the early vote and then also quite a bit of the day of vote today. And you can see it is very close, 50-48. The president with a slight lead there. If you remember back 4 years ago, the president won Niagara County by 18 points. Right now he's only up 2. But remember, and we just saw an update there, remember though, this is skewed toward the early vote. Now, it doesn't count any absentees, but it doesn't include very much of the day of vote today. So we're going to see these numbers continue to change. But for now, the president winning 2 points up there in Niagara County. All right, we'll go to Erie County now. 7% of the vote in. So again, a lot of early vote. Some day of vote today, 61-38. For comparison purposes, 4 years ago, Hillary Clinton won Erie County by just 6 points. Now the margin is just huge. We'll see if that tightens again as we get more of the day of vote added in there. And then finally down in Chautauqua County, you can see also kind of a light pink color there. Just a 4-point race. Right now, President Trump with about 800 votes more than Joe Biden. This is with 7% of the vote in. I know I sound like a broken record, but we've got a lot of early vote and then also some of this day of vote coming in right now. So we'll continue to follow the numbers, but remember, this state has already been called for Joe Biden. That is not a surprise to anybody, but people want to know, how is my community voting? So that's why we want to do this county by county here. And look, we just got a huge amount of numbers in from Chautauqua County. This just updated live. Now it's 57-41. So the day of vote today, we expected a lot of Republicans were going to come out and vote today, right, as opposed to the early vote. Well, that just changed these numbers. Now the president leads in Chautauqua County by 16 points. We have close to a third of the total vote in now. What we expect will be the total vote in Chautauqua County. We'll continue to monitor these. We also want to tell you about the 2 congressional races that we're following. This is NY23. This is Tom Reed's district down in the southern tier. Just a couple of counties reporting right now. Chautauqua County, pretty close there. This should update in just a moment, again, as the Chautauqua County numbers come in. The other county that we have in this district right now is Schuyler County, and that's where Tracy Matrano is drawing a pretty good lead there. Look at that, 100% of the vote in. Might want to double check that. It's not a lot of votes. We're looking at about 2,000, a little more than 2,000 votes total. So we'll wait for this to color in. This is not expected to be a race that Tom Reed loses, but you never know. We'll wait to count all the votes. So we'll monitor that congressional district, also NY27, and Steve, we'll see as we learn more about the presidential race here in Western New York.
Absolutely. And the presidential race, as far as New York is concerned, I don't think it's a surprise that Joe Biden is projected to win. Votes still coming in, but this is largely a Democratic state. So I have a question for you, Bruce. The governor of this state, also a Democrat, also who endorsed Joe Biden, Andrew Cuomo. He's got a gigantic budget problem on his hands. Is the solution completely dependent, in your opinion, on whether or not Joe Biden captures the White House and finally gets the federal aid that he has been calling for months and months?
It's not just New York's problem, Scott. It's every state's problem. It's every city's problem. It's every county's problem. It's every school district's problem across the country. Make no mistake about it. The hit to state and local budgets has been astounding. It's been astronomical. Look, at Buffalo State College, one of my colleagues and I talk about how states plural, not just New York State, but how states are going to cope with this. What is government going to do with its obligations? And its obligations include managing an enormous array of programs that the federal government connects states with. Okay, Medicaid isn't just for poor people. Medicaid is for a lot of old folks. It's for a lot of disabled people. It's astoundingly expensive every place. New York State gets part of its money for Medicaid from the federal government. It gets part of its money for everything from the federal government. It's a revenue sharing deal. So how New York State closes its budget gap, I have no idea. I don't know what they're going to do. But I don't know what Pennsylvania's going to, I don't know what South Carolina's going to do.
I completely respect that there are a lot of cities, counties, municipal governments, state governments that are hurting. What makes New York different is that going into this financial budget year, the state already had a deficit, which is really kind of, if you will, astounding. We were in boom time, and they had a $7 billion hole to start before COVID hit.
But that's out of a $170 billion budget. Okay?
But how do you have a $7 billion hole during boom time? That's the part I don't get.
It's real money, okay? It's real money. Okay?
Is to me.
And remember that hole opened up because of one thing that the federal government did. Congress and this president decided to end the deductibility of state and local taxes, which changed the game entirely just before this tsunami of difficulty hit. Look, every state in the union is in this place because unlike the federal government, states and counties and cities and school districts have to balance their budgets every single fiscal year. The federal government doesn't do that. When Donald Trump and the Republicans decided to open up a $1 trillion deficit before the pandemic by giving out a $1 trillion tax cut, they didn't have to worry about it because money is cheap. They just said, well, we'll inflate it away. Well, guess what? Now they have to inflate away a $3 trillion deficit. So this is going to come, there's a lag time. It's like the first wave of the tsunami hit this year. The next wave is coming to a town, to a city, to a school district near you. And holy cow, the Federal Reserve Bank is sitting there saying, please, somebody in Washington act. Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump have decided not to act. And every state, not just New York State, every state is behind the 8 ball right now.
No, I understand that. And gentlemen, we got to run. Mary Allison Scott, back to you in studio. We're running.
All right, very good. Thank you, Steve. We're going to step aside for a quick break now from our webcast, but you can check out another local update over on Channel 2 in just a moment, or you can watch our half-hour newscast on 2 on Your Side at 10 on Fox 29.
And that newscast will also be streamed right here as well. So don't go anywhere. All your Decision 2020 coverage is right here on WGRZ.com.
For the folks on the webcast, thank you for sticking with us. And for those watching on Channel 2, thank you for joining us as we take you through Decision 2020 in Western New York.
Of course, we are watching the results trickle in from our local area right now. We also want to get to our Michael Wooten. He is once again in the Information Center. And Michael, what are you seeing right now on the board behind you?
We've seen quite a bit of results come in from counties where we already had some results. Still waiting for a good chunk of our area, but let's walk you through what we know right now. We'll start to the north in Niagara County. 51% of the vote now in, so they are adding up pretty quickly there. This includes a lot of early vote and then some day of vote today. And now President Trump has taken a pretty substantial lead, up 13 points there. Again, the state of New York has already been called for Joe Biden, but we know people want to know how these go county by county. Just for reference purposes, the president won this county by 18 points last time. Now it's about, 13 points there. We'll go to Erie County. This one's lit up blue. We just got a chunk of vote in Erie County, and now we're up to 17% there. And you can see Joe Biden 58% to 40% for President Trump. So that race is expanding there as we just got some vote total in. And then finally, down in the southern tier, Chautauqua County, this one kind of the opposite there. President Trump racking up some pretty good numbers. But as we zoom out, this is New York State as a whole, 72% for Joe Biden, 27% for Donald Trump. So this is mirroring what the exit polls showed early on, and that's why NBC News and virtually all of the organizations, the journalists, called this race pretty early after the polls closed. Before we go, I want to also show you New York 27. This is the congressional race that we've been talking about a lot. The incumbent Chris Jacobs facing Nate McMurray, the Democrat. A little bit of results in here, 7% total when you look at the district. Right now, Jacobs with a 45% lead. So it's a 9-point race right now. The lead is bigger in Niagara County with about a third of the vote in, 57-42. And then as we come down to Erie County, just a tiny bit of the vote in right now in this district, and Jacobs with a slight lead there. If Nate McMurray wants any chance of winning, and that is an uphill battle, but if he wants any chance of winning, going to have to do better in Erie County. Still waiting in this district for the vote in Orleans County, in Genesee County, in a lot of these places over to the east. So we'll see how this fills in as we go throughout the night. But again, we'll show you here, New York, the presidential race, as we go county by county. Look at that. We just got a vote in from Genesee, about a quarter. And is that right? No, sorry. There we go with Genesee. Sorry, no vote in. That fooled me for a second. I don't think Joe Biden is going to win Genesee County by that kind of margin. We'll continue to monitor these as they come in. Scott and Mary Alice should be getting some vote in pretty soon from some of these counties that we haven't heard from yet.
Big board is keeping Michael on his toes tonight.
Sure is. All right, Michael, thank you. We're also looking to get verified answers to your questions throughout the night. We'll see you in a few moments. Well, the polls are closed, and we now wait as votes continue to be counted tonight.
Well, obviously, the biggest race of the night is the race for the White House. This is where things stand as we speak, with more numbers coming in every single minute. Obviously, Joe Biden was declared winner of New York State, given that it is a perennial blue state. If anything major develops in the presidential race, we will let you know.
All right, of the key races locally, let's check this out. We are following the race for the 27th Congressional District. Of course, that is, like Michael said, between Congressman Chris Jacobs and his challenger, Nate McMurray. As we see here, Chris Jacobs with a substantial lead right now, 58% to 41%. And I can't see what percentage.
21%.
That is small, but it is 21% of the precincts report. I need to put my glasses on, I guess. Okay.
Well, in the race for the 26th Congressional District, Congressman Brian Higgins is facing Republican candidate Ricky Donovan, and this is with 16% of the precincts reporting. Higgins is ahead right now, 72% to 27%.
Hey, Congressman Tom Reed is up against Democratic challenger Tracy Mitrano for the 23rd Congressional District, where he has a relatively large lead, 65 to 33%, with just about 10% of the precincts reporting right now.
Well, when it comes to state races, we are following the two, including the race for the 61st Senate District to replace State Senator Michael Ranzenhofer, who retired. It's between Democrat Jacqueline Berger and Republican Ed Rath. And right now we have just 8% of the precincts reporting. Very close, though. Jacqueline Berger with 51% to Ed Rath's 49%.
All right, let's go to the 60th District right now to replace former state senator, now Congressman Chris Jacobs. Sean Ryan is challenging Joshua Mertzloff. Let's see here, 63 to 37% with 16%, so a pretty substantial lead for Sean Ryan right now.
Well, these numbers are coming in quickly tonight.
And luckily we have to your sides Michael Wooten. Once again, he is live in the newsroom breaking everything down for us. Michael, some of these people have larger leads, but still the percentage of the precincts reporting is still quite small.
Yeah, and some counties are coming in a little bit faster than others. We actually now have our first look at Cattaraugus County, so might as well start there. This says 0% of the precincts reporting. That means this is entirely early vote, which you would assume would probably benefit Joe Biden. And that's why in this county that's expected to go for President Trump, it is 53-45 right now. We're talking about just 6,000 votes or so there. But some early numbers in Cattaraugus County. We'll swing over to Chautauqua County. There you can see President Trump with a huge lead. Quite a bit of the vote in right now in Chautauqua County. They're always great about getting their numbers in. 62% reporting there. Remember, this does not include any of the mail-in voting, so we're going to have to wait days and days to get all of that. Quickly, we'll go to Erie County, 17% in right now. This is early vote and also quite a bit of day of vote. There, President Trump losing by 18 points. This was much closer 4 years ago. Hillary Clinton won Erie County by only 6 points. So that's a big margin. And finally up in Niagara County, more than half the vote in there, and President Trump is leading at the moment. So throughout the night, we'll continue to take you county by county and see how the presidential race is shaping up. Before we go, though, you mentioned New York 27. Just want to show you here, we have two counties reporting so far. In Niagara County, Chris Jacobs is up by about 9 points. And then if we go to Erie County, you can see Chris Jacobs is winning there as well. Nate McMurray is going to have to do better in Erie County as we get more votes in if he wants any chance of making this competitive, guys.
All righty, Michael Wooten in our newsroom tonight. Michael, thank you. Now, some of those local races, they're not going to be called right away, obviously, and that's because of how many absentee ballots, as Michael was mentioned, have been counted.
And the Erie County Board of Elections has a busy few days ahead. That's where Two on Your Side's Dave McKinley joins us live now with an update. Hello, Dave.
Well, as we were reporting, Mary Ellis, almost 81,000 absentee ballots have already come into the Erie County Board of Elections. Remember, as long as they're postmarked by today, they'll still count, so they expect more to become trickling in over the next couple of days, and they won't start to count them until 2 weeks from now. You mentioned just how important they might be in tight races. There was a theory that more Democrats would vote absentee than Republicans, and in a couple of those key races that we've been focusing on, we find that is true. New York 27, the McMurray-Jacobs race. You've been mentioning that all night, and we can tell you that nearly to vote in that race through an absentee ballot. And how about that state Senate race, the New York State 61st, the Berger-Rath race? I can tell you in that one, there were 15,000 Democrats who voted absentee, only 5,000 Republicans. 3 times as many, a 10,000 vote difference. So if that race remains tight, then these absentees, which they won't start counting for 2 weeks, are going to be pretty important all of a sudden. Any election has some hiccups here at the Board of Elections. They report no major problems. things like this. For instance, this morning, one polling place opened late. The reason the elections worker there overslept and they didn't get there in time to unlock, but they were open in 10 minutes. And also one other thing that we're really looking forward to here, and that is by night's end, we should have a good idea whether or not this is indeed a modern-day record turnout for an election in Erie County. It would have to be 72% to eclipse the 71% turnout, not of 4 years ago, but of quite a time ago, 1996, when Bill Clinton beat Bob Dole. Dave McKinley, Channel 2 News.
All right, Dave, thank you. There is so much to unravel when it comes to this election tonight, both nationally and, of course, here locally in the Western New York region.
Very true. And luckily, we have two on your side. Steve Brown standing by with our political analysis team. Steve?
Well, thank you very much. We have Bruce Fisher and Carl Calabrese. We want to talk about the states that matter. Not that New York doesn't matter. We love New York. We bought the T-shirt. We can sing the jingle. But we want to talk about some Great Lakes states that might determine who's the Oval Office occupant come January. And we're talking about Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin right now. Ohio seems to be also in that particular mix. If there is a factor we should be looking at, gentlemen, to say my guy is going to win this state or these states, what is that factor that you're looking at?
Well, Carl always talks about the hidden Trump voter that hasn't been picked up by the polls. Sometimes I think he's talking about Sasquatch or something because
no, Bruce, they have been picked up by the polls.
The polls have been pretty consistent. The question that nobody anticipated was how do you factor in half again as many voters as we've ever seen before? We haven't seen this many people voting. We're on the line to do like 150 million people voting in this election nationwide. Like, holy cow. So in Wisconsin, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania were the three states that Trump took away from the expected blue wall that Hillary Clinton was supposed to maintain in her march to an inevitable victory, which didn't happen. But he won them by the slimmest of margins, 40,000 votes in Pennsylvania, 20,000 votes in Michigan, and I think 50,000 votes in Wisconsin. These are big states. So the question is, what the polls all say that Joe Biden is going to win them by 14 points, 9 points, or 5 points. That's Wisconsin 14, Michigan 5, Pennsylvania 5. Are those real?
Well, let's have Carl have a shot at this. Carl, I mean, the polls were all in favor of Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, and we know who won the race. So, Carl, who are those hidden voters that Bruce is talking about?
Well, they were hidden voters. They were shy Trump voters. Most pollsters agree that Trump underpolled 4 years ago between 2.5% and 3%. Now, there's some pollsters this year say that that's actually going to be 6%. My position has always been, if it's 2.5% to 3%, Trump loses. If it is 6%, he'll win, and he'll win those states that he won by the skin of his teeth by 4, 5, 6 points. We'll just have to wait and see. But when you look at the map, the Biden map was really hoping to get one of the three southern states, Florida, Georgia, or North Carolina. And also on the other side of the aisle, the Trump map was hoping to get one of those three states that Bruce mentioned, Wisconsin, Michigan, or Minnesota. And both of, that's what both campaigns were hoping to flip, one of those in those clusters. And is it going to happen? Right now, it looks like Trump is in good shape in Florida. Looks like he's in good shape in Georgia. North Carolina is dead even to the 10th of a point with the figures I've just seen. Yep. Wisconsin, Michigan, actually, I'm looking at the numbers now. In Michigan, Trump is up by 13 points, but only 30% of the vote is in. Wisconsin, he's up by 4 with 30% of the vote in. Pennsylvania, he's up by 2 with 30% of the vote in. So, it's going to be a long night. But that was the calculations I think both campaigns were looking for.
If I may jump in there, Carl, I think it's going to be a long week because
I'm going to jump in and tell you it's going to be a long month, but and unfortunately, but we've got to go. Gentlemen, thanks. We got to go to a break. Channel 2 News at 10. We'll continue after this.
Well, with a lot at stake in local elections, both Republicans and Democrats in Erie County are prepared for whatever happens.
And over at Democratic headquarters, things look a lot different than years past because of COVID-19. And that's where Two on Your Side's Claudine Ewing is live for us tonight. Hello, Claudine.
Mary Alice, you said it just right. Good evening to you. It looks so much different. I can tell you it's, to be honest, it's just dull. That's how it is right now. What we're seeing are some candidates on the Democratic line who are coming, taking the microphone, saying a few words, and that's pretty much about it. One thing we can say is that everyone that we've spoken with today, and basically what we've also seen in the field today, everyone is impressed with voter turnout, whether it was the early voting or the people who came out today. One of those individuals who is really impressed by it is Congressman Brian Higgins.
You know, the good thing is people are engaged. When you have 100 million people voting early, whether it's through the polls or through the mail because of the pandemic, but the numbers, it's the highest voter turnout in 100 years, which tells you something.
And really no one can even dispute those numbers. It's going to be a long night for some of the people that are actually here, some of the state assembly seats, people who are on the ballot. We are expected to hear from Sean Ryan any moment. He is expected to arrive. So that's the situation here from Democratic Party headquarters. We're going to send it back to you, Scott and Mary Alice, in the studio.
All right, thanks very much, Claudine. It's just so strange, isn't it, to see such a subdued election night? I mean, normally Claudine would be standing in a room that would be packed by political supporters and heavyweights and lightweights, and tonight just, I mean, pretty color behind her, but not the usual hustle and bustle that we're used to.
And of course, we have Steve Brown, who's here with our analyst. We'll get to him a little bit later on, and we'll get back to Michael Wooten as well. And right now, I'm being told that we are going to go to Jeff Preval. Jeff, let's see what you have to say right now. Hello there, Jeff.
Yeah, hi there, Scott and Mary Alice. Well, I can say that much like over at Democratic headquarters, we really haven't seen a whole lot of action down here at GOP headquarters. However, I was able to speak with Congressman Chris Jacobs a short time ago here at the Avant Hotel. He says that he's really feeling good about his chances in this election, mainly because of the high turnout that we have seen. Jacobs did not say whether or not he would make any victory speech or any type of concession speech, really looking at those results as they are coming in. Of course, Jacobs won a special election in June, so he's really only been in Congress for a few months, and we were able to talk to him if he is given a full term that he plans on working with lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
I've had a good relationship with people on both sides of the aisle when I was in the Senate in Albany, taking that same approach down in Washington, that you get things done by working and finding commonalities. So, like, I've worked with Brian Higgins on a lot of things thus far.
I asked Congressman Jacobs whether he feels there's any lingering effects from, of course, the criminal case against Chris Collins. Now he says that he feels that a lot of voters, they have simply just moved on. Now here at GOP headquarters, there is really no schedule that we have received in terms of speakers. We'll really have to see how the night goes. More election night coverage right after this.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. I want to give you a quick update on the presidential race here in New York State. We have new numbers just coming in from Orleans County, one of those places where President Trump did really well 4 years ago, and that's looking to be the case right now as well. 60% of the vote in, so it's coming in pretty well. President Trump over Joe Biden, more than a 2-to-1 margin. We are getting a lot of votes in now, county by county. We're going to be updating all of this as well as the congressional races here in Western New York with new numbers and guiding you through the region as we continue to get those tallies in. Make sure you join us at 11 for an update on that. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more right after this.
Well, welcome back. Want to get you a quick weather update. You know what? Got no problem with that because the forecast for the next few days, it's really easy and it's really nice, especially by November standards. Look at the 5-day. Look at all of that sunshine. The only price we have to pay for Wednesday and Thursday, at least, is that there will be a little bit of a breeze. Not nearly as much as what we dealt with yesterday, but this area of high pressure to our south, it's pumping in the warmth, and it's also going to block any shower activity well off to our north, well off to our west. When it comes to the winds, they'll be gusting tomorrow from 20 to 25 miles per hour. You'll notice it. It's not going to be all that bad. The wind may actually pick up a little bit tomorrow evening, but then it kind of drops back off again Thursday afternoon. Again, still noticeable, but not all that bad. So here's how Wednesday breaks down. We start off in the mid 40s. We climb into the lower 60s. And that is just the beginning of our climb, friends. Look at this, low 60s again on Thursday. Plenty of sunshine, again, a little bit of a mild breeze, and then we stay nice and clear Thursday night. Here's the pattern as we go through the rest of the week. This big blob of warmth is just going to slowly shift to the east. This area of high pressure stays off to the south, again, blocking everything off to the north. A stretch like this, it's uncommonly beautiful for this time of the year. Enjoy it. Whatever it is you want to do outside, this is your week to do it. And look at the weekend, my goodness. Upper 60s, and then your record warmth Sunday and Monday with highs close to 70. We'll be back with more 2 on Your Side at 10 on Fox in just a bit.
Hi there, everyone. This is Steve Brown. I'm with Bruce Fisher and Carl Calabrese. We're going to talk a little bit more about voter turnout today and the expanded opportunity to vote. We talked a little bit about this early on. Did it meet expectations for either of you, for your relative party members? I think the Democrats capitalized on this pretty well. Carl, could have Republicans capitalized on this expanded opportunity to vote a little bit better?
Sure, they could have. And one of the problems, and a lot of Republicans expressed frustration with Donald Trump, talking down the mail-in vote, and probably suppressed it to a certain extent. A lot of Republicans were thinking that maybe my vote won't be secure. I'll wait to go out and vote. But there's no question there was some frustration on the part of Republicans saying, why is he saying that? It's a reality. Let's maximize it. And it's going to be a reality going forward, and we're just going to have to learn to deal with it and maximize it in terms of future elections. But there's no question, I think, that Trump's comments about the security of mail-in votes did not help the Republican mail-in vote.
Carl, were you comfortable with your sense of the security of absentee votes, early votes, and traditional day of election polling?
I am in New York. I think New York does a very good job of checks and balances between the two parties. But there are a lot of states, Florida, for example. In Florida, you run to be the election commissioner of your county. And if you win, you're it. So if you're a Democrat, you do not have a Republican watching you or vice versa. Unlike New York, where nothing gets done, Bruce will tell you, nothing gets done in the Board of Elections without a Republican watching the Democrat and the Democrat watching the Republican. So I'm comfortable with it in New York, but I can see why there would be concerns in other states where you have one party running the Board of Elections.
Right. No, I understand your point. Bruce, we're kind of running out of time here, and I'm sorry to short sheet you a little bit, but did Democrats capitalize as well as they should have with all of this opportunity to vote early?
Depends where you are. It seems to me that the turnout in some of the traditional Democratic areas was not as strong. We won't know whether that's because Democrats, like they did in Pennsylvania, requested 2.5 times more absentee ballots or mail-in ballots than Republicans, and then just the rest of them sat out on election day. But we won't know for a week whether that's true.
Unfortunately, at least around here, Bruce, is going to be at least 2. I'm told we're out of time, gentlemen. Thank you very much. Channel 2 News at 10 will continue after this.
Another half hour is over. Thank you for watching 2 on your side at 10.
We will see you back here tomorrow night and, of course, over on Channel 2 tonight at 11. An exciting election night, everybody. We'll see you later on.
This is a half hour cut-in.
Welcome back, everybody. Our Decision 2020 coverage continues right now here on Channel 2 and Fox 29 as we get in more results from what is going to be a long night ahead and maybe a few days, too.
Yeah, I'm sure it is going to be. So let's check in right now on what we are seeing at this hour. First, we have the 27th Congressional District with Republican Chris Jacobs having already beat Democrat Nate McMurray in a special election. Of course, that was back in June, and trying to do it again for his first full term. So far, we'll see. Jacobs has a substantial lead right now with only 30% of the precincts reporting.
Then there's the 23rd Congressional District in the Southern Tier, with Republican Tom Reed trying to hold his seat against the challenger he beat 2 years ago, Democrat Tracy Matrano. And this time around, with just 12% of the precincts reporting, Tom Reed is way ahead, 67% to 32%.
Of course, then there is the fight still for the control of the state Senate tonight, with Democrats looking at 2 seats out here as they try to get a veto-proof supermajority in the chamber. Will it happen? One seat is the one that Chris Jacobs, of course, left when he was elected to Congress over the summer, the 60th Senate District, which is Buffalo Island, Grand Island, and the southern towns along the lakeshore. Democratic Assemblyman Sean Ryan taking on Republican Joshua Mertzluft. In the results so far, you can see Sean Ryan with a substantial lead, 63 to 37%, with about a quarter of the precincts in.
And another Senate race to watch out here in the 61st District. That is Amherst, Clarence, Newstead, and Genesee County. Republican Mike Ranzenhofer retired from the seat, and Democrat Jacqueline Berger and Republican Ed Rath are running to replace him. Right now, with just 16% of the precincts reporting, Ed Rath is ahead 52% to Berger's 48%.
And of course, one other that we do want to spotlight right now, the race for Chautauqua County Executive. Now that George Borrello is a state senator, Richard Morris Rose running on the Democratic line tonight against Republican candidate Paul Wendell. And Paul Wendell has a substantial lead. It says 100% of the precincts reporting, so you can't get more than 100%.
Yeah, no, it's pretty definitive. We could call that one. Well, we know that Buffalo is one of many cities getting ready for any potential unrest tonight and beyond. Buffalo police say that they've coordinated with county, state, and federal partners to prepare for anything that may happen. And the FBI is also working with cities, including here, to keep people and businesses protected.
And we are also looking to get verified answers to your questions throughout the night. Just text them to Text2 line at 849-2200, or you can get in touch with us on social media. It's easy to do.
Well, NBC's election night coverage continues right now over on Channel 2.
And we are going to keep covering the local returns on WGRZ.com.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our Decision 2020 webcast here on WGRZ.com and our 2 on Your Side mobile app. We'll be with you only online for the next half hour, but you can watch our full 11 o'clock newscast either on Channel 2 or right here.
Of course, polls have been closed now for about an hour and a half here in New York State, which means that we are getting more and more results every moment from voters here. Let's send it right over to the newsroom right now, where our man in charge there tonight, Michael Wooten, is tracking all those results as they continue to come in. And they're coming in minute by minute, Michael.
Yeah, they definitely are. Scott and Mary Alice, we'll start with the big picture. This is the country as a whole. You're starting to see a lot of states color in. This doesn't necessarily mean a candidate has won this state. This is just which candidate is leading at the moment. But New York has been blue from the very beginning. NBC News has called the state of New York for Joe Biden. So what we can do is show you county by county in our region what's happening here. We'll start in Erie County, the most populous. There, Joe Biden winning 56 to 42. I'll take you back 4 years ago. Hillary Clinton only won Erie County by 6 percentage points. So Joe Biden's certainly doing better. However, this includes all of the early vote, which came in earlier, and only about a quarter of the day of vote. The absentees, remember, are saved until later. So this could tighten a little bit, but right now, Joe Biden with, close to 40,000 vote lead over President Trump in Erie County. Just a little bit of the vote in Cattaraugus County. It's the other one that's colored in blue right now. This is entirely early vote, and Joe Biden beating President Trump by about 8 points there. This will change. It is expected that President Trump will win Cat County. So now we'll take you through the others. In Chautauqua County, 100% in. Kudos to Chautauqua County for being the first with all the vote in, with the exception of the mail-in ballots. President Trump winning here 65-33. Want to look here and see. Let's see. Chautauqua County 4 years ago, it was a 23% margin of difference. So President Trump outperforming how he did in Chautauqua County 4 years ago. So that's pretty interesting. As we zoom back out, we'll go up to the north. This is Niagara County's number. President Trump with an 18-point lead there. And then Orleans County, 60% of the vote in, President Trump winning there as well. But as we zoom out and show you the entire state of New York, 42% of the precincts are now reporting, and Joe Biden there more than doubling President Trump. Not a surprise. We knew Joe Biden was going to win the state of New York, but it is interesting to show you county by county and compare how the candidates are doing to 4 years ago. Now I want to go through the congressional races here locally, and we'll start in the southern tier with the 23rd district. These numbers are a bit deceiving right now because of which vote is in, but we'll walk you through what we know. About 5% of the total vote, that's all that's in for this congressional district. And Tracy Matrano, the challenger, is beating the incumbent Tom Reed. A big reason for that is Tompkins County. If you look back to the last election, the only county that Tom Reed lost was Tompkins County. This is entirely the early vote, almost 10,000 vote lead there by Tracy Matrano. So that's making up this big difference. We're still waiting for a lot of these counties to come in. This stretches across a lot of the southern tier. In our region, you have some vote in Chautauqua County, but very little. And you can see it's very close. This is mostly early vote, which we think would favor the Democrats. And then in Cattaraugus County, again, entirely early vote here. Tracy Matrano with a very slight lead. That is probably going to change. This race, NY23, is not expected to switch control. It's expected that Tom Reed will win, but we'll count the votes and see where it goes. Let's go now, though, to NY27. We'll back out here. This is the Chris Jacobs, Nate McMurray race. And right now in Erie County, this is with 23% of the vote in. Chris Jacobs with a double-digit lead there. In Niagara County, 100% of the vote in this congressional race in Niagara County. Look at that, a 30-point edge to Chris Jacobs. This is excluding mail-in ballots, so we'll have to see how that plays out. But as far as early in-person vote and then the day of vote, that's a huge lead. And then in Orleans County, even bigger with 60% of the vote in. So we'll continue to follow NY27, NY23, and see how those play out throughout the rest of the night. Still a lot of vote to count there, and you've got to remember, Steve, and I know we've been telling our viewers this a lot over the past weeks and really months, this is an election unlike any other. We have so many mail-in ballots, so there are a lot of unknowns. So remember, what we're telling you here is early vote and some of the vote from earlier today.
All right, terrific, Michael. Thank you very much. The election like no other before this one was the last one, the last presidential race. And I'm about to say something that might give Democrats some agita right now. You remember 4 years ago when all of a sudden some of the southern states started flipping towards the president, the now president? It appears the same sort of thing going on right now. It appears that Texas has solidified for the president. It looks like Florida, as much as Florida can be solidified, has been solidified for the president. Georgia looks like it's well in hand with 57% of the vote in, so some question mark there. And North Carolina kind of a razor's edge margin in favor of the president. Also, the president seems to be doing better in Ohio with 74% of the vote in there, with the president with a slim margin there. So if the Southern strategy, gentlemen, was the way the president was going to win, it looks like that is starting to firm up. So are we again looking at those Rust Belt states? Because I'm going to point to one that Carl and I discussed during the break. It looks like Arizona is in position to flip. We believe the president won that last time out with 75% of the vote. It looks like Joe Biden has an 8% lead there with 75% of the vote in. So maybe, and that's a question mark. So are we in for the same kind of election night that we were in for 4 years ago?
We could be, especially in North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina now is we're talking what, tenths of a point, 7, 8 tenths of a point lead. That could be a lengthy recount, and I'm not sure what the law is in North Carolina in terms of counting mail-in ballots, if they've already started or there's a delay post-election before they even start counting them. So yeah, this could be, as you said earlier, Steve, we could be talking weeks. But yeah, I think he's looking better in the South. I think earlier in the evening there were lots of hand-wringing about Texas on the Republican side and then Ohio as well. But he seems to be doing well in Michigan. He also seems to be doing well in Virginia. Again, there's a lot of vote to come in yet, but
I disagree with you on that. Look,
I didn't say one.
I think we've got the 2016 map, right? And the 2016 map hasn't changed yet. So Trump won Florida in 2016. He won Georgia. He won everything in the South. Just a sweep in the South, right? He won Arizona. Well, Arizona seems to be flipping to the Democrats. So that still leaves the 3 states where this was decided last time, and that's Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So if Pennsylvania is the last one where we get the votes in, guess where all the attention is going to be for the next couple of weeks? It's going to be in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania, yeah.
Right? The votes are trickling in.
We're right back to the beginning because I think everybody agreed early on, Bruce, that Pennsylvania, was the keystone state in both camp strategies. And so I think after all the machinations, we may be back to that state just to our south.
So I've just done a map here. It's 269 electoral votes to 269 electoral votes, not counting Pennsylvania in Biden's column. If it's in Trump's column, it's 269 votes for Trump, okay? If Pennsylvania does what everybody expects it to do, which is to go to Biden, it's 279 for Biden, and he's the next president. The question then becomes, what happens if it's 269 to 269?
As somebody said, Bruce, being that this is the year 2020, that's probably what's going to happen. Right? Why not
bite your tongue? But I mean, how doesn't this increase the likelihood that we're looking at court challenges?
Oh, sure.
Oh, of course.
No question.
There's armies of lawyers.
Both sides have lawyered up.
Land, briefcases, shiny shoes, bad haircuts, all over the place.
No question.
Shining sea.
This is lawyer heaven, about to descend.
But is that? I mean, as somebody who covered the recount in 2000, a portion of it, and much of the 2000 campaign, at this point in time in this country, is that a good thing?
Of course not.
No, absolutely
Everybody
not.
thought that there would be a decisive result tonight, okay? And it doesn't lead us to believe at the moment, but the moment is not a moment that is full of information, sadly, okay? We wanted this to be election night like the olden days when we all knew what the outcome was and we could go out and have a drink with our friends or wake up and kick the dog in the morning, whichever way it went. That's not going to be how it works because of all of the changes in the voting patterns this year.
Steve, there's the old saying that financial markets hate uncertainty. Well, political markets hate uncertainty, and I think the public hates uncertainty, especially this year, especially all that's gone on this year, to go into a protracted period of uncertainty as to who the next chief executive of the United States is going to be, the leader of the free world. Again, it's 2020. I guess it's just the nature of the year, but it would not be a good thing for all of those markets.
No, I totally agree, but I'm starting to look at, the nationwide map, and it's starting to firm up in a way that suggests that, we truly won't have a really good idea who the winner is for a while. Now, it's early in some places. I mean, we've only got the map I'm looking at, 32% of the vote in Pennsylvania, 37 in Michigan, 37 in Wisconsin, 37 in Minnesota, and 25% in Iowa, just to name a few places. So a lot of the vote to come in, but it has a familiar feel to me. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the only thing that seems to be changing right now is Arizona. Okay, so if Trump wins Pennsylvania, okay, then the map is the same map as 2016 minus Arizona for Trump. That is a tie of 269 to 269. Okay. Now the question then becomes, is Pennsylvania really in play? Is it really a possibility for Donald Trump to win? You know, with poll numbers saying 5-6 points for Biden consistently. That was the polling average going into this thing. Is that, you know, we know that it was within the margin of error in Florida, within the margin of error in North Carolina, within the margin of error in these other places like Texas. Trump is going to win those. Okay. Is he going to win Pennsylvania? Is it going to flip 5 points? Really?
No, but Bruce, wait a minute though. That was 5 points was last week. You were correct. Last week, the real clear political average was Biden up 5 points in Pennsylvania. As of yesterday, Biden was up 1.2%. Not only is that the margin of error, but as you know, in politics, political polling, the trend is almost as important as the number. And Biden has lost almost 4 points just since last Wednesday.
Well, that gives us a tie. That gives us a tie.
Yeah, no, Pennsylvania is definitely in play for Trump.
Well, gentlemen, I think we're going to spend a lot of time taking a look at the other Erie County, the one that's just across the border, where the city of Erie, PA, which has been a battleground in that state for at least 2 presidential cycles and probably a little bit longer than that. And there's also some suburban counties in eastern Pennsylvania, kind of ex-urban counties of Philadelphia that are also, you know, kind of places where Donald Trump did really well and Barack Obama did very well 4 years earlier. So, you know, I think we're looking at the same sort of battleground counties in that state, that we were looking at 4 years ago.
I mean, let's face it. What we're looking at so far this evening is a confirmation of something that we all kind of knew, which is that this is a deeply divided country, right? There's a clear pattern here. The major population centers have voted Democratic, where the population is more dispersed, and in the South, the vote has been consistently Republican. It's a geographic distribution that is, shall we say, not made in heaven. It's not made for unity. It's disunity wrought in the land. Anybody have any picture yet about how the United States Senate is going to vote, or how the Senate seats are up?
Well, I can tell you Lindsey Graham's held on to his according to a couple of projections. So it looks like, you know, that seat did not flip.
Well, that wasn't. Nobody in their right mind thought that was going to flip. The question is between Tom Tillis and Cunningham.
That was dead even. Last I saw it,
right?
Dead even. Yep.
At the moment, with 75% of the vote in Arizona, the astronaut, Mark Kelly, is up 10 points, Steve, over the incumbent Republican McSally. Okay, if you know anybody who knows how to tell the candidates apart in the state of Georgia, write it down on a piece of paper and send it to Santa Claus, because that person needs a special gift at Christmas time. Right?
The other day, Karl Rove predicted the Senate would go 51-49. But he said, I just don't know what party's going to have 51 and which one's going to have 49.
Lovely.
So you know, Susan Collins in Maine. Well, Susan Collins, she herself is disappointed with her own record. That was a cartoon I saw. But that seat was supposed to be flipping to a Democrat, right? As of 2 days ago. I don't know what that.
Alabama will flip Democrat to Republican.
I'm sorry?
Alabama will flip from a Democrat to a Republican, and the Republicans shot in Michigan with James.
And then you have, as I was just on the phone with my friend Ken Ryan, former president of the Fort Peck Indian Reservation, Tashunga Saba we call him, and he says that Bullock is neck and neck with Daines out in Montana. We know that there's a split vote going to happen in the Senate. We know that Hickenlooper, the popular former governor and presidential candidate out of Colorado, is going to beat the incumbent Republican in the state of Colorado. What else do we know? Oh, I don't know about the other ones. Anybody here? You know, so The question is Chuck Schumer going to be the majority leader, right? What would that mean? Are we going to have divided government?
Well, what would that scenario mean for us in Western New York? He's the majority leader in the Senate. Okay, great. Good for you, Senator. What's that mean for us?
You know what? It depends on what the national economy does. Depends on how we pull out or don't pull out of the COVID crisis. Depends on how Wall Street. What does Wall Street do? Wall Street was looking at a big change here, and now suddenly, I don't know. Maybe there won't be a big change. Maybe there'll be paralysis. It is not a happy scenario, whichever way we go. But
is the only, and I want to get this to Carl. Is the only way stuff gets done in Washington anymore, Carl, is if one party holds all three legs of the stool, the House, the Senate, and the White House? Is that the only way that stuff gets done anymore?
Yes, for the short term, yes. Both parties have built-in bases that view reaching across the aisle for compromise as betrayal. And both parties fear primaries from their different wings. And so, unfortunately, the days that when I was in politics where you fought like hell during an election and then you sat down to figure out how to get things done, that appears to be over for the foreseeable future, unfortunately. But those are the times we live in. And, those political bodies reflect the divisions of the population that Bruce talked about earlier, the polarization.
Bruce, you concur?
Unfortunately, I have to add a kind of a partisan note here. As Norman Ornstein and Henry Aaron from the Brookings Institution said, the Republicans have for at least since Newt Gingrich became the Speaker of the House of Representatives and gave us the contract with America, as he called it, there has been a determined press by, and it's ideological, it is intellectual. I don't think it's very well thought out. It certainly doesn't impress me as a guy who went to law school and teaches economics. I don't think it works to do constant crisis, but that has been the Republican mode. Mitch McConnell right now has 400 pieces of legislation sitting on his desk that he will not bring to the floor. That is a partisan, in your face to the Democratic House of Representatives. It is a paralysis that Republicans seem to believe, and the evidence seems to be in the proof is in the pudding, as it were, that works for them electorally. Make government not work, and then say to Republican constituents, don't trust government because government doesn't work. Well, it seems to be working as an election.
Bruce, let me remind you that the famous quote, never let a good crisis go to waste, came from a Democrat.
Well, unfortunately, in this day and age, I think the level of imploring people to distrust government or distrust other government is a bipartisan flu, unfortunately. Gentlemen, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Scott and Mary Alice, we're going to toss it to you.
Thanks very much, Steve. It's great to hear those two sages
Yes.
give us interesting insight on the past and our present and the future.
They both are sages. You are
They
correct. All right, well, thank you for joining us for our Decision 2020 webcast. We are going to step aside for a few moments right now, but we will be back here online and also on Channel 2 at 11 o'clock.
That's right, so keep it WGRZ.com for all your election night coverage.
It has been 2 hours since the polls closed, and the results, they continue to roll into our newsroom. Good evening, everyone. I'm Scott Levin.
And I'm Mary Alice Demler. Not only are we tracking the presidential election, there are several major races here in Western New York that we're following.
And we have great team coverage tonight. We're going to bring you live reports from all the major races in the area. We will get to our reporters in just a moment, but first, we do want to check in on some of the results that are coming in right now.
The biggest race we are following, of course, is the presidential election.
And here is a look at the electoral map right now. And if anything major develops within the presidential race, we, of course, will take a quick break and we'll rejoin NBC News and their election coverage tonight. And one of the biggest races that we are tracking here in the Western New York area, of course, the 27th Congressional District. This is the race between Congressman Chris Jacobs and challenger Nate McMurray. And as you can see here, with almost 40% of the precincts reporting, Chris Jacobs has a substantial lead with 61% of the vote.
And in the 26th Congressional District, Democrat Brian Higgins is seeking his 9th term in Congress, facing Republican Ricky Donovan. Right now, 41% of the precincts are reporting, and Higgins has a sizable lead, 70%